If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. This occurred when I was 18 and backpacking my way through the world. I always looked a few years younger than my actual age and often had problems getting into places. I often find myself hissing, "No, I'm really an adult," to the people who refuse to believe my ID card. I arrived in Western Australia in January in a little town that looked nothing like the brightly coloured postcard world that I left behind in Sydney. I rented a car and was getting used to the Aussie way of driving and didn't pay attention to the fact that I'm running out of fuel. So naturally, now the car suddenly gives up. I wasn't worried though. I had a spare tank in the trunk. I had problems getting the lid off though. No matter how hard I pulled it, it didn't give in. So I started walking back to the little cluster of shops I spotted earlier. I was greeted by a man on an ATV-ish thing, sitting outside a shop. He nodded in the direction of the road and said, "Problem with the car, missy?" I must have looked puzzled because he smiled and said, "No one comes walking in here from that direction. There's nothing out there." I explained the situation and he listened sympathetically. "Do you rent the car from the Free Freddy? No wonder he gave you it. You can't trust that bloke, you see." He introduced himself as Charlie and quickly got off and offered me a spare tank, saying, "You want to ride back? It's an awfully warm day. No ozone layer here, you see." He was speaking weirdly. I felt a bit stupid hesitating, but he seems like a nice guy. And he was right. The sun was terrible. My shoulders already burnt despite sun cream. He must have sensed my hesitation because he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm not the boogeyman. I promise you. I just don't want anyone out here in this weather. I would have offered you a ride if you're a 40-year-old bloke too. Here, take my helmet. My head ain't worth protecting anyway." And so I get on the back of his ATV, the spare petrol tank in front of me, and get a somewhat uneasy feeling in my stomach. "Just tap my shoulder if you want me to slow down, alright?" He drove the short distance to my car, but he didn't slow down. I tapped his shoulder again and again. He drove past it. In the rearview mirror, I could see him grin as he speeded up. I can't jump. The speed was so high it would have killed me, and I had no idea where he was taking me, but I knew his intentions were evil. This continued for 30 minutes until I could see a rest stop, clearly made for people to stop and enjoy the view. As we approached the rest stop, I see my chance and grab hold of his throat with both hands, squeezing as hard as I can. I felt him struggle to keep the vehicle on the road while fighting for air. As we come up alongside the rest stop, he had no choice but to stop. I threw myself off, tossing the helmet and screaming loudly enough to wake the dead. There was a truck there, but no one in view. However, only a moment later, the door to the loo opened, and this terrifying looking man with a beard pops out and demanded to know what the hell was happening. I pointed to my abductor and cried that he tried to kidnap me, and the grisly man tried to grab a hold of the abductor but wasn't fast enough. Soon, he was gone. The grisly man turned out to be really nice and phones the police for me, waiting with me until the police arrive. Since that day, I don't judge by appearance. Charlie was a nice looking person and seemed to have good intentions. George looked like he had been awakened from his ancient lair, but was a really good guy. I later made my way back home, and this is by far the creepiest thing that ever happened to me. Back in 2000 or 2001, I was driving by myself, from visiting my mum in Colorado back to Arizona. I was in a station wagon and had a desk my mum had given me that was my grandfather's. I've always been scared driving at night, and I'm always worried there's someone in my back seat that's gonna get me. This might be because I've watched far too many scary movies, or because my mum's paranoia rubbed off to me. I was in the army and drove back and forth a lot to visit her. She would get mad at me for sleeping at rest stops or gas stations, telling me someone's gonna kidnap or kill me. But I just didn't want to be bothered with the hassle and expense of a motel most of the time. So I'm driving on an empty section of highway late at night with no other cars around. This red truck comes up behind me, flashing me with his lights and honking his horn at me. I was thinking to myself that there was something wrong with my car. Maybe there was something wrong with the desk in the hatchback. Because why else would somebody be so insistent on me pulling over? So I pull over and get out of my car. As I'm getting out of my car, he's directly behind me, still flashing his lights and honking his horn. I go to about the middle of the car. I planned on going to the back to see what could have been wrong with my car when it hit me. Why is he still honking at me when I'm getting out? That's odd. Then he gets out of his truck. That's when I knew something just wasn't right. I jumped back in my car and sped off. The nearest exit's 50 miles away or so. He follows me the entire time. I take the first exit and go to a crowded grocery store with a laundromat next to it. There was an ambulance parked at the laundromat with its lights flashing, and I'm next to it. I figured there was an ambulance, so there must be police officers there. Now the man stayed in his truck in the grocery store parking lot watching me the entire time. I was terrified. I didn't want to get out of my car and felt like an idiot if I would have had to tell someone what happened. I waited an hour, and finally he left. After he left, I waited a little longer before continuing my drive back to Arizona. I was paranoid and watched for any red trucks the entire time. Fast forward about 5 or 6 years, I was watching a crime show on TV, and what story pops up? One about a man on that exact stretch of highway with the same red truck, using them tactics to get a woman to stop before murdering her and others. I'm so glad that my gut told me something was wrong, and I got back in my car and kept on driving. This happened to my wife while we were dating. When we were dating, I lived in southern New Hampshire and she lived in Philadelphia. Most of the time, I would come down and visit her. Since she works at college, she had a few weeks off in December. She decided to come up and stay with me. She's packed a week's worth of clothes and her cat in the car and drove up after work. Driving on an interstate at night means coffee, which means bathroom breaks. She pulls into a rest stop in Connecticut. By rest stop, I mean bathroom, vending machine, and a rack of tourist brochures. As she's walking towards the building, a man, wearing jeans, an army jacket and knife cap walks out between 2 cars starting on her. The man immediately reaches out, grabs her head with both hands. He's standing in front of her, arms out straight. She's not able to pull his hands off her head. He's staring into her eyes with a detached expression. As she described it, I think it's the same expression I use when I'm trying to debug or figure out why something isn't working. He's moving her head back and forth, keeping her off balance, keeping her at arm's length. She stares back. He seems to evaluate her for a minute or two, then lets go and quickly walks into a wooded section. She runs into the rest stop, finds an attendant. She uses the bathroom, then tells the attendant is willing to walk her out to her car to make sure she leaves safely. She walks out with the attendant and notices that a white van that was previously there is gone. She gets in the car, thanks the attendant, and drives off. About 10 minutes later, she's processed what happened and calls me. Then, the bit about the van worried her, but terrifies me. We talk for a little bit. She's familiar with the law enforcement and offenders and have a brief that this wasn't just a foul mugging. She talks to the police, but they didn't seem to be too interested. What worried her the most was that her cat would have suffered in the cold if something happened to her. After that, every time I drove between NH and PA, I've stopped at the rest stop for a few minutes to try and look for white vans. I don't know what I could have done, maybe got a reg plate at least, but I've never seen them. It's terrifying thinking there's people out there like this. I'm just glad nothing ever happened then. First, I'm gonna say I'm a 16-year-old male with paranoia. I always carry a knife with me and get scared easily. I'm 175 pounds, 5'7" and a power lifter. I was crossing Alabama into Mississippi when I had to use a bathroom. My grandfather was driving me back to my dad's house in Jackson, MS. He pulled into a rest stop area and stretched his legs when I got to the bathroom. There was no security at the rest area and bathroom is in the back of the building. The only person in there with me was at a urinal. I walked to the stall farthest from the door. As I walked by him, he turned around and started walking at me. His pants weren't unzipped at the urinal. He reaches for something in his pocket and I hear a flick. That's when I realised that something's in his hand, and I forgot my knife. I then see the bathroom door open and someone came in. The guy's coming towards me, put in his pocket in his hands, and left. This happened 2 weeks ago. The guy was white, bald in late 30s, maybe 40s. He had a black shirt with green cargo shorts, and I haven't really told many people about this. I'm very grateful that the stranger came in when he did. God knows what would have happened to me if he didn't. This was a story I grew up hearing my mum telling me about. I was really young when this happened, and I know for a fact it was before I was 5. I only have some foggy memory of the event, especially because my mum at the time didn't want to freak me out. Now, for some context, first, we have a family all over the country. I remember spending so much of my childhood just on the road trips from state to state to visit family. So we know our ins and outs on travelling. 2. When I was a child, I would randomly hug strangers telling them I loved them. I was so filled with joy and love that it just spilled over to everyone. There was basically only one stranger I never immediately latched onto the second I saw them, being this story. So my mum was talking to me, and we're taking a visit to see some relatives while my dad was staying at home with brothers. So, she had to go to house sit, and in general is a better caretaker of me than my father, so it made sense I went with her. We were driving for hours until we finally hit a rest stop, and so got out to use the bathroom. Now, There was already this guy in the parking lot, and according to my mum, it looked like he was watching everyone who entered and left the rest stop. The second we get out of the car, he did too. My mum held my hands as we went into the restroom, but immediately picks up on the fact that I let go of her hand to hold the other, the way facing the man. Now looking back, she told me that it was clear somewhere in my tiny child brain that I picked up on some sign of danger, because I avoided this man as much as I possibly could and would quicken my pace to the restroom and car. I never did that with another stranger again. I had never blatantly avoided another adult like that. Anyway, as we do our business and head back to the car, the man had gone and left us, only then to follow us back in his own car. My mum immediately realised what was going on, trying to shake him off on the highway. He wouldn't budge, and tried to get as close as he could. Apparently while doing this, a semi-truck driver notices how frantic and off she was driving and could see her looking in the back. He realised what's going on and drove up to her side, making eye contact with her, and they're on the same page from then on out. Turns out, the driver called up on the radio to other truckers saying what was going on, and a bunch of drivers from different routes nearby came to the same highway that we're travelling on. A few minutes later, they began blocking out the other guy's car, and essentially trapped him away from my mum and I as she turned onto the next exit to find another rest stop, as the original truck driver follows us in. He got out and talked to my mum and told her he picked up what was happening, asking if we're okay, and drove with us to a Burger King and got something to eat. We talked and he got back onto the road until eventually we go separate ways. So to the guy who was probably going to kidnap me and my mum, thank God you never got a chance to, and thank God for the truck drivers who probably saved our lives. My dad works for a large printing company, and they completed an overnight rush job for a business. My dad got tasked with dropping the order off. It would take 8 hours each way to drop off the order. He was going to take my mum, as she's a retired teacher, and he figured it would be nice to have someone to drive each way. However, the night before he was going to leave my mum, he comes down with the flu. He left early the next morning and promises my mum if he gets tired, he's going to stop either at a restaurant or rest stop. So he made it without incident to drop off the papers. It's about noon when he set off again, and soon realises that the traffic's horrible. My dad decided that he'd take the long way home. It would add an hour or so, but he feared it would take longer to wait in the traffic. He drove straight for hours, until he realised he had to pee, and badly. My dad's a prostate cancer survivor, so needs to pee a lot. Also, he was starting to get sleepy and figured he should pull over and take a nap. It was winter, so about 4:30. Now it's winter and about 4:30, and the sun started to set, and he notices a stop ahead, quite glad to be able to rest. He pulls up. Now, he does a little stretch, calls my mum to tell her that he's stopping to stretch his legs and maybe catch a nap, then heads to the bathrooms. Now the place was pretty much deserted. There's an old Chevy pickup next to my dad, and there was an RV with a family packing up that was probably their dinner. He went into the bathroom and opened the first stall. He was in there doing his business when he hears someone talking. He thinks at first they're talking to him until he realizes that the person A is on the phone, or B, they're talking to themselves. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. We'll just take another one. and then bring it to the mother. The man said, almost singing to himself. My dad said he sounded like he was young, between late teens to early 20s. Then, before my dad could say anything, he starts unzipping his pants, starting to get weird. The guy randomly starts screaming, smashing his head onto the mirror and then on the wall. He started screaming in a more high-pitched voice now. At that, my dad runs out of the stall and he quickly opens a bathroom door running to his car. He locks the car door when he notices a skinny young man running out of the bathroom. He's looking for my dad and sees his car. My dad starts the car and begins backing up when he literally runs full tilt at him, screaming. My dad drove off. He's so badly shaken up by this that he had to pull over to the next town just to relax. He was paying for his coffee when that same Chevy pulls up. My dad grabs his coffee and hides his face. The kid walks in, goes up to the nice older cashier who my dad brought coffee from, throws his arms around this woman and starts sobbing about how he's sorry, mother, and how he let another one get away. My dad's heard more than enough now and quickly tosses his coffee away and quickly sprints to his car and makes it home safely. To this day, my dad refuses to stop at any rest stops now. He only stops at major places you can actually pull over at.